Ron, I know that you have had a real heart of compassion for hurting people yourself. You came through Victory World Missions Training Center, and you and your wife, and then y'all began to pastor, but you've been involved in outreach for a long time.
I remember Pastor Billy Joe always saying that a crisis always is a door opening. As I began to pray, God spoke to my heart and said, I'm interrupting your life. And he said, it's the interruptions of your life that great things will happen. Yeah. I remember as I finally called Pastor Roy back and said, yeah, I'm going to go with you. And I said, so we went to examine the devastation. And, you know, it was life-changing because we stepped off the plane and the chaos. It was even, we had to fly at that time to Dominican Republic, and we had to ride 5 hours on a car to even get there. Yeah. And as we pulled in the country of Haiti, you could see the devastation in the beginning of the country. And each step of the way as we went, we saw more and more crises the closer we got to Port-au-Prince, until by the time we got into Port-au-Prince, you can't even imagine the buildings that were crushed. And as we began to meet up with the different ministries who were there and begin to view the crisis, every one of them, there was never enough supplies, never enough for what the people wanted to do. And in a lot of the situations, like the first orphanage we went into the orphanage, there's gates there, and the orphans that were in there were fairly well being taken care of. But then there was a multitude that was outside of those gates that was starving to death, that couldn't get to that food and couldn't get that provision. And it's those people that are crying out to God that God is hearing. And as we went through the town, we met a lawyer. A lawyer was he was the most prominent lawyer in Port-au-Prince. But in 34 seconds, he lost his business, he lost his home, he lost his courthouse, and now he's living in a tent in the middle of Port-au-Prince with nothing to do and has a lawyer's degree. In fact, we kind of find out he was the lawyer of Love a Child, that is the organization that we're working with in Haiti. Wow. And everything has been devastated there. And the first orphanage we went to, the pastor and I were at, they held us 2 babies, and I was holding one of the babies. I remember it was Pastor Raj and myself. The doctor looked at us and said, this baby only has 5 weeks to live. And we looked at him and said, what do you mean? He said, if I don't get him to Miami and if he doesn't have an operation within 5 weeks, this baby is not going to live. And then he spoke to us and he said this, he said, the hardest thing for me, a doctor, is he said, I go into a room and he said, I have to evaluate when the children are there, which ones will I spend my time with that I can save, and which ones do I got to leave behind to die? Wow. And at that point, I couldn't even comprehend in my mind. I couldn't comprehend. You're having to make a decision between life and death because of resources. And then I come back to our country and I realize the resources that we have and the capabilities that we have. And at that point, I realized that God interrupted my life because, like the woman with the issue of the blood, the man that was paralytic, whatever it was at in the Word of God, they always interrupted Jesus' life. And the interruptions are where great things and great opportunities happen. You know, sometimes people look at such a devastation and they think, well, there's no way that we can do all that's needed. You know, what difference can the little bit that I have make? But it makes a big difference. It's like that starfish story of the little boy walking along the beach and seeing all these starfish, and the man comes up and says, you know, what are you doing? He was throwing one at a time back into the ocean. Yeah. He said, well, I'm saving these starfishes and throwing them back in. And he says, son, there's thousands of them on this beach. How in the world can you make a difference of, you know, you're never going to save all these thousands. He says, what difference does it make? And the little boy goes, he picks up one and he says, it'll make a difference for this one. Amen. And so whatever we do is that we're making a difference for the ones we can.